It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. Glad to have you with us. You're joining us live on our website. That's great news. You're catching us live on Patriot FB. We should be streaming video there shortly, Jeff. And in addition to that, of course, we are always live on americasvoicenow.org. And our show repeats every night on Big Country Radio, Big Country 99, between 12 and 2, midnight and 2. So just wanted to thank those of you who are joining us live on our website this morning. I see a whole bunch of you out there. I got New York on there, Sugar Cane, is it? Sugar Grove. Fort Wayne, I think that's Indiana. Lebanon, looks like New York. Palm Coast. Fort Walton Beach, Mountain Home. I see Mountain Home in there. Welcome, Mountain Home. Some California. I see Texas in there. I see Louisiana in there. I see some folks up in Chicago. So anyway, we're glad to have you on board. Thanks very much for joining with us live. We're going to tackle 4 specific topics this morning. This is Friday, so it's TGIF, certainly for me. Our first topic this morning is going to be, are Muslims infiltrating the U.S. government with the help of Barack Obama? I think we're going to find at the end of this segment that the answer to that question is absolutely. There has been some startling appointments made, including one which was recently made for a Robert Malley, who's now been appointed as the senior director of all things, the National Security Council. Huh? Yeah, you heard me right. I mean, what was that all about? And in February, President Obama met the Muslim Brotherhood leader in the White House. Interesting. There are a glut of news stories out there which reflect the fact that the President of the United States has been loading the dice, shall we say, in the government with people who are friendly towards or affectatious towards the Muslim frame of mind. Let's just leave it at that. And there are some of these that are Hamas supporters. Some of these are al-Qaeda supporters. Some of these are PLO supporters. Some of these are supporters of Iran. I'm not saying that there's a problem with Muslims in general, but when you've got people who have a high position in government that have a friendly relationship with jihadist organizations that are named as known terrorist organizations, you got a problem. And I'm not the only one saying it, folks, although you're probably not hearing very much about it on the mainstream media Ministry of Propaganda channels because they're not telling you the truth. And in fact, if we get into our second segment on FCC monitors and how that's a bad idea for the Republic, you're going to hear even less. But I want to save all that fire for that segment. Our third segment is going to be why your AR-15, will your AR-15 fail you when you need it most? There's a new article out there this morning, and I'm going to make sure that you get an opportunity to understand what's going on with it. In the Washington Times, it's a very lengthy article, actually, and the headline is, "Our troops have been left to fend for themselves when the Army was warned in flaws of the Army's M4 carbine." So we're going to talk a little bit about that because I know that a lot of folks out there are AR-15 owners, And while I cannot personally own one, at one point in time, I was considered a pretty fair armorer, and so I'm somewhat familiar with the issues surrounding these particular claims. And so we're going to talk about that because what I want to do is make sure that you have your ducks in a row when it comes to something that you may have to rely upon for your life or the lives of your family or the protection and defense of your home. And you can pick the threat, but if the weapon doesn't perform the way it's supposed to perform, then you got a problem. Our final segment will be, what is DLE terrorism and why has it become an epidemic in the United States of America? Well, DLE terrorism, and I'm sure I'm going to get a slew of email about this. DLE terrorism, domestic law enforcement terrorism, being perpetrated upon the innocent citizens of the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, it has reached an epidemic. It is the new American epidemic. Murder by cop. We're going to explore that thoroughly. All right. Let's jump back to our first segment and get into that story. Before we go there, I'm going to give out our listen line phone number. Make sure that you jot this down if you have any interest whatsoever in being able to catch America's Voice on our listen line, which is totally free to you to use. It's area code 415-325-0725. That's 415-325-0725. Now, for the record, that service costs you nothing. You just dial in. You'll hear a brief 8-second recording that says, you're listening to America's Voice, and boom, you get your own private, personal audio track of the last recorded show. So anytime after about 10 o'clock this morning, this will be the program that you would hear. I encourage you to not only use it yourself if you're traveling in a vehicle. There are some controls that you can utilize there, and so you may want to listen to some of the instructions to see whether or not there's a way for you to kind of jump forward. I'm not quite sure how functional those controls are, but it does give you a great opportunity to listen to the program when you're not either in a terrestrial radio broadcast area or you don't have access to the internet to catch it live or on a podcast. So anyway, again, that number is 415-325-0725. And I would encourage you to not only use that number yourself, but share it with others who you know would want to hear the program. Okay, so the problem that we have here is a scenario where we are injecting individuals within our higher echelons of government who have a significant track record of activity with subversive groups, jihadist groups, threats to America kind of groups. Now, I'm not going to play the fearmonger here and say that, there's another 9/11 coming and all of that, because the truth is, and we'll touch on this in our fourth segment when we talk about domestic law enforcement terrorism, you have a greater chance of being killed by your own government, whether that be military or law enforcement, whether that's state, federal, or local, than you do of being killed in a terrorist attack. And that's the simple reality of it, folks. I mean, let's be candid. More Americans have been killed at the hands of law enforcement since 9/11 than more of our soldiers have been killed in Iraq. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth. But the real challenge that we have here is that irrespective of whether you believe that the Muslims are a threat in terms of a jihadist terror attack, there's no denying the fact that they are intent on infiltrating the United States of America for the simple purpose of instituting Sharia law. We're seeing it all over the nation, much as Europe has seen it throughout its cities and nations in the Eurozone. How do I say that, or why do I say that? Well, for the record, there are entire neighborhoods in Great Britain the middle of England, in London, that you cannot go. And the police dare not tread. In fact, it's gotten so bad in merry old England that they actually have their own Sharia courts. And the government allows this. The backlash that's coming from the infiltration of the Islamic faith into government that is either secular or does not have a significant majority of Muslims and Islamics as members of their that make up their communities, are being inundated, and they are relentless and they are tireless about making changes to the societal structure and the culture of these nations. I watched a video the other day, which I posted up on our Facebook and our YouTube and website, about how in the United States of America, there was a group of individuals, and it's about a 20-minute video, but you'll be stunned when you watch it. Basically, it's a group of individuals who are standing there with signs, and they're Christian, and they're surrounded by groups of Muslims. And during the entire videotape, while the police are standing there watching, these Muslims are throwing milk crates, soda bottles, soda cans, rocks, fruit, eggs. I mean, it's unbelievable. And meanwhile, and you can hear the people on the video incredulously saying, I can't believe the cops aren't doing anything about this. See, what we have in this position is a culture which is trying to replace the organic culture of the nation. So think of it like this. When a bad cell makeup, i.e. a tumorous cancer, gets into the system, it begins to kill those cells around it and attempt to take over the host. And mark my words when I say this, that is exactly where this is headed. That's the intention, that's the purpose, that's the motivation. This is not about a fair crack for Muslims and Islamics in the United States. This is all about their philosophy that, one, any non-Muslim is subjected to their rule, and there are no rules and no laws that they have to adhere to or abide by with reference to that individual. They may feel free to wreak whatever havoc they would choose upon that individual. And they can do it openly and with the approval of their imams and allegedly their Quran. Now, I'm not here to judge Islam as a religion. I'm talking about the people. And I would say the same thing, by the way, about the ultra-rigid Christian who says, well, because I believe that you can't drink and you can't dance and you can't sing and you're not allowed to clap in church, you shouldn't either. Get out of my face. The truth is, it's no one's place to dictate what your religious beliefs should be, how you should go about exercising your religious beliefs. And this is a national problem. They may want to try to give you the impression that it's not, but I'm here to tell you it is. And where we're seeing this head is a change in the very fabric of our nation. We have incident after incident after incident. And if you don't believe that this can change the very fabric and the nature of it, like a dye, a drop of dye that gets into the fabric and immediately begins to spread out amongst the fibers, don't kid yourself. The truth is, we've already seen it. They're operating within our military, and we've already made adjustments for them. We've made cover-ups for them when we talk about the Fort Hood shooting, which was never deemed or termed a terrorist act. It was deemed a workplace incident. Really now. So you're telling me that a guy who's been in touch with overseas terrorists, known, labeled terrorists, and is asking them for advice on whether or not it's acceptable to kill Americans in pursuit of jihad, who's having a moral crisis of conscience about what he can and cannot do in pursuit of jihad, and who yells Allahu Akbar as he fires a weapon at his stated, in writing, enemy, but it's a workplace violence action. Hello? Robert Malley, he has been pointed out for a long time, back as far as, or as early, I should say, as 2007. It was brought to the attention that the relationship between he and Barack Obama was subject to some investigation. He was the foreign policy advisor to Barack Obama, who was then a presidential candidate back in 2007. And because when this was exposed, it caused such an uproar, they cut him loose and fired him because of his ties to Hamas, to the PLO, and jihadi and anti-Israeli groups. Now, I don't care whether this isn't about Israel, so don't even go there with me. I know there's plenty of you out there who believe that ultimately, Israel is a threat to the United States just like jihad. That's not where we're going. This is about the subject of whether or not we have appointments, and we can have that conversation on whether or not the Israelis have infiltrated the United States government, and there's absolutely no doubt they have. But one wrong does not allow us to commit a second wrong. And we don't balance our nation by injecting enemies into the highest executive levels of government, regardless of what their stand or political ideology or allegiance may be. Malley was part of the American negotiating team that dealt with Yasser Arafat in Camp David. He has long been a problematic individual. In fact, at the time, we're talking about back in 2007 now, when Obama was still running for president, there was a security official who was quoted as saying, "We are noting with concern some of Obama's picks as advisors, particularly Robert Malley, who has expressed sympathy to Hamas and Hezbollah and offered accounts of Israeli-Palestinian negotiations that just don't jive with the facts." So the guy is a rewriter of history to make matters worse. He's a radical, and he should not be involved in any way, shape, or form in a position with our government. Now, WorldNet Daily has an article out there, too. And this article is a little earlier. This one goes back, I think, to 2012, when they blew the whistle on this. And U.S. Army Lieutenant General William Jerry Boykin was the one who was blowing the whistle on this, saying the Muslim Brotherhood is a radical Islamist organization that has successfully penetrated both political parties and the delicate areas of defense and national security. Well, we don't have to doubt that now, a year and a half later, because here we are looking at Malley, who, quite frankly, was, without a doubt, a dangerous character who's now been appointed by the president to be the senior director of the National Security Council. So Boykin wasn't blowing smoke when he said that back in August of 2012. He was pointing out the fact that this is going to be the end result. And sure as shooting, it has become. Alan West blew the whistle on this a long time ago. We know that Obama has spent billions of U.S. dollars trying to prop up the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt in direct opposition to the will of the desires and the wishes of the people there. How do you account for that? And we see him doing it, by the way, in the Ukraine. Billions of dollars, $5 billion at last report, of money spent, U.S. money spent, to prop up this Ukrainian government who wants to side with Putin instead of going to the European Union, which is the will of what the people say they want. You want to know why the world looks at us with either disgust, hatred, or sheer mirth? Because what we proclaim to be, we're not. What we promise to sell, we can't deliver. And that which we preach, we definitively do not practice. You know why we'll never have the respect and or fear again in the world, on the rest of the planet? Fear is necessary to hold back your enemies, and respect is necessary to keep your allies close. We'll never have it again because in the past decade, we've allowed PC, political correctness, and, with the advent of Obama, the direct intervention of dangerous, and I do mean dangerous, jihadists within the inner circle, the inner sanctum of our government. Mark my words, folks. This will pay huge dividends for them, and we, the American people, are going to pay a terrible, terrible price. Mark my words. Hang on to this video, download it and store it somewhere, because you'll be watching this one again. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about FCC monitors. I'm going to read you a brief op-ed from Ajit Pai. I say that because he is an FCC commissioner, and he's in complete opposition to this issue of why the agency is inserting monitors into the newsrooms, including newspapers, by the way, which the FCC has no purview for authorization over. We're going to look at that when we come back. You can find us live every morning at americasvoicenow.org and patriotfb.com. Patriot, F like Foxtrot, B like Bravo.com. We'll be right back.